everyone, Miss Carrie here from Miss Carrie's Creations. This week, a few members of the creative design team have some bonus Love Your Stash videos for you. We know how much you loved the Love Your Stash creations back in February, so we have decided to add a few bonus videos in the upcoming months. If you missed our Love Your Stash series, you can click on the playlist link down in the description below. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you might notice that the background looks a little bit different. I had the opportunity to go on a retreat at a beautiful place called A Picture Perfect Place. Now, I wanted to let you know this because occasionally there's going to be a little bump in the video. There are some other people in the room, and I did my best to set up my camera mount, but anytime someone else moved at the table or I reached for a snack, I ended up bumping my camera mount. And I could have just scrapped this whole video, but this layout is one of my favorites, and I really wanted to be able to show you how this layout came together. So I started by creating a background using some of our wood grain papers. Now this wood grain already has slats in it, but I wanted my page to have more of a fence-like look. I wanted it to match some of the targets that are on the archery range our family visits. So I've gone ahead and cut apart all of the wood slats on this paper. I've cut some jagged edges on those wood slats, and I've inked the edges with a deep brown toffee ink. I'm laying all of these slats across the page. I have a piece of linen cardstock for the background, which is a really pale gray color. I'm just going to keep cutting and inking and layering these wood slats so that I can create a multi-dimensional background. Like I said, I wanted it to look a lot like the rustic targets that are on the archery range where my son is shooting his bow. So my son was not the only one shooting his bow that day, but he is the only one I got pictures of. I was also out there with him at the archery range that day. My son introduced me to this sport a few years ago. He gifted me with a custom-made compound bow in a purple camo color. If you're familiar with the Muddy Girl brand, that is how he had my bow designed. It matches all of my other Muddy Girl gear. Now, I'll have to admit, I have really enjoyed going out and shooting at this archery range. I'm able to take the dog, I'm able to spend some time with family, and it's a great hobby for me to have outside of the craft room. Alright, so now that that background has been built, I'm going to select some different patterned papers to go behind these photos. The original green design I chose was just too light of a color, and I wasn't fond of that chevron pattern. So I've gone ahead and grabbed another piece of paper. I believe this is from our Timberline collection. It's a retired collection from way back, and I'm using my Versamat to help me measure how wide I need to cut this strip of paper. So now I've laid this piece of paper across the page. I've gone ahead and backed my photos in a charcoal gray cardstock just to help them pop up off the page a little bit more. And now I'm digging through my die cut binder to find a couple of die cuts that match the theme of this layout. So I've created a photo mat for that large photo because I really want it to stand out on the page. Now, unfortunately, I forgot to hit record when I came back, so a portion of this video is missing. But as you can see, all I've done is torn the edges. I've just roughed them up a little bit, and then I inked them with some charcoal ink. And now I'm using my tweezers to curl some of those torn edges. Now I'm just going to go ahead and tuck it here behind the photo to create a photo mat. And then I'm going to adhere this down onto the right side of the page and place my photo on top of it using some 3D foam tape. This photo mat not only matches the other gray elements on the page, it really helps this photo of my son become the focal point of my layout. Now I'm going to start adding a couple of decorative elements to this page. I've used my Cricut Joy to cut a couple of little die cuts out of craft paper and black cardstock. I'm going to be placing these throughout the layout. I'm going to start by tucking that little circle behind the photo to help highlight this side of the page. And on top of it, I'm going to place a couple of die cuts that I had grabbed from my die cut binder. Around that circle, I'm going to be placing some of these little arrows. You can see me pulling them off my Cricut Joy mat right here. I loved having my Cricut Joy at this retreat. It hardly took up any space on my work area. Now you are limited to a 5.5 by 11.5 inch cut if you have the longer mat, but almost all of your scrapbook cuts fall within that size range, so it's perfect for you to take to all of your crops and retreats. Now that I've decided where all these elements are going on to the page, I'm gluing them in place. I chose these small arrows in a gray color, not only to match the other gray elements on the page, but also to help kind of point your eye towards the focal point photo and draw your eye across the page. In between each one of those arrows, I'm adding some metal studs. Now, I don't know how many of you still have some of these in your collection, but I have way more than I need. So I was happy to be able to use a couple of them on this layout. It really gave this page a rustic, masculine feel. Most of the scrapbook layouts I create have a masculine theme, but I don't post many of them here to my YouTube channel. It is not a commonly searched item, so I'm never quite sure if it's a layout people would like to see. I do post them on my blog and on my Pinterest boards, but rarely do I show you any process videos here with that masculine feel. I would love to know if you guys would like to see more masculine pages or if you prefer the floral pages that I have shown you in the past. Now that I have the Cricut cuts in place, I've dug through my sticker bin and I found a couple of these feather stickers. They have the gray and the brown and the blue colors that are all part of this layout. Before I put down that embellishment cluster, I've decided to add some stamped splatter images over there on the lower left. I'm using a toffee colored ink to match the craft colored circle and some of the other toffee colored and craft colored elements on the page. These splatters add a nice little distressed element onto the page, and it helps to anchor that embellishment cluster. All of the items I'm going to be using in this embellishment cluster are retired items, but you might have a few of them in your stash, or you might have something similar. The feather stickers were suggested by one of the ladies there at the retreat, and they obviously go well with the theme of the bow and arrow. I've also added a title that says the bravest thing you can be is yourself, which matches my son's personality perfectly. I've also tried to add as many bear elements as I can on the page because we have nicknamed this child Bear. Not only is he big and grumbly and gruff like a bear, but he has the softest heart like a teddy bear. To add to the wood elements on the page, I found this little wooden pin with a paw print on it. And then to match some of the circular elements on the page, I found this little metal button that says guaranteed quality since forever. To kind of anchor some of those elements, I found this little border, which I cut in half because I want to use the other half on the opposite page. And then to ground that wooden pin, I found another little circle that I've tucked behind the bear. I wanted to draw your eye to the title and add another arrow element to the page. So I've grabbed this little puffy sticker from the Chalk It Up assortment. I'm just going to place it here under that blue button. All right, now that the first page is done, we can start designing the second page. I'm going to match that wooden slat background by creating even more wood slats on the opposite page. The total width of all of these wood slats together totals about 12 inches. So it's just like I placed a 12 by 12 piece of paper across the background of my page, just like we've done with some of our other layouts. But instead of just placing that 12-inch piece of paper down on the background, I cut all of those slats out individually, added the little jagged edges and some inking, and then I layered all the pieces together to give it this beautiful three-dimensional look. On this right page, I'm going to duplicate those splatter stamped images in the upper right-hand corner, and then I'm going to place a piece of that patterned paper across the center, just like I did on the first page. Now, after I placed this piece of paper down, I noticed that a couple of the slats were a little bit too short, so I just had to go in and make a few adjustments to the page, and now it looks just fine. Just like I did on the first page, I'm going to back these photos in a charcoal colored cardstock, and then I'm going to try to figure out how I want these to go down onto the page. Rarely do I layer my photos on top of each other, but that smaller photo isn't hiding a bunch of details, and I really like the way this arrangement looks. In the upper right-hand corner, I found another feather sticker, a little tree that matched the bear on the opposite page, and another wooden element that says, "This is a good sign." I know my son would get a kick out of that sign, and I'm pretty sure he has a shirt that says that. I'm also laying out a couple more Cricut cuts and that border that I had left over from the other page. As I lay out each of these elements, I'm trying to create a visual triangle, and I'm trying to create a little bit of movement and point out certain photos on the page. On this page, I want to make sure I add some journaling about my son. So I found this little tag pocket that's been retired for a long time here, but it actually matches perfectly with all of the other elements on the page, and it's going to be tucked underneath the photo. Now that I know where all of these elements are going to go, I can start adhering them down onto the page using adhesive and foam tape. Even though I don't have the journaling on my tag yet, I can still adhere it under the photo. When I get home, I'll just pull the tag out of the pocket, type up my journaling, run it through the printer, and then I'll add it onto the layout later. To adhere that little wood embellishment onto the page, I'm going to use glue dots. I found that glue dots work best for most of our wood elements. On the lower portion of the page, I've created this Cricut cut. It says Explore, and it looks a lot like an old arrow. It's been cut out of craft paper and black cardstock. This arrow matches some of the other craft elements on the page. We have the border, and we have the circle, and we have the Be Yourself title. Around that arrow, I'm going to add a little bit more movement by adding a third gray arrow in an arc shape. This is not only going to mirror the other arrows on the opposite page, it's also going to help draw your eye over to that corner and point to one of the other photos on this layout. Again, I've added another little metal stud on that arrow, and I'm going to add a third wooden element that has a picture of a bear on it, and I'm going to place that right on top of the Explore title. To mirror the other black arrow, I'm going to add one in the upper right-hand corner that points to the wooden sign. All right, so now I am back home. I'm going to show you this layout in a little bit better light and give you a little look at that journaling that I added onto the tag. After typing up my journaling, I ran the tag through my printer and added some sentiments on the front and the back. I truly love how these two pages turned out, and I really liked using elements from my stash that gave a little insight to my son's personality. All of the sentiments and bear images reflect my son's personality. That silly little "this is a good sign" wooden element just speaks to his sense of humor. And then, as you can see, I mirrored a lot of elements on both sides of the page just to give this layout some balance. Like I said, I love how everything came together. I love that I was able to use up a lot of items in my stash, and I was able to record some memories of my son out on the archery range and show a few little hints of his personality using elements on the page. I want to thank you for joining me today as I created this archery layout. I hope that this project inspired you and gave you a few new ways to use those items that you might have in your stash. A few members of our creative design team have also added some bonus Love Your Stash videos this month. I have put links to their channels in the description below. If you missed any of our Love Your Stash videos in February, you can go ahead and click on that playlist icon above. While you're at it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future videos. I hope you have a wonderful week. I can't wait to see what you create.